Good morning, Littleton. Today is Thursday, September 4th. I'm Karen Morrison. I'm here with Jim Duggan, and you're listening to 01460 on the Go, the podcast for Littletonians by Littletonians. Today we are doing our second installment of the Shaker Lane series, and joining us today is Michelle Kane, principal of Shaker Lane Elementary, and Marylee Bursick. Thank you. And Marylee has been with us every step of the way through this process, and we're very glad to have her and her expertise with us today.
Thank you.
Marylee, can you just tell us a little bit more about your role?
Yes, absolutely. So I am the architect for this project. I've been involved since the very earliest days when we did the interview for the project, when Littleton was choosing between Studio G and a couple of other firms. Mm-hmm. And from the very beginning, I feel like it's just been a really great match, and the energy that we had between all of us when we were trying to plan all the spaces and talk about what the students really needed. It's just been a really great team so far.
Well, we're lucky to have you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So today is our...
If I can add.
Yeah, please.
Just with that, just through my experience, I've in other communities built a few schools and have dealt with architects. You guys do a great job. You do a great job. You
Thank
really,
you so
really
much.
do.
Really appreciate it.
Top notch.
Thank you.
100%. Thank you.
So today is our second installment in the Shaker Lane series. You might recall we have another episode prior to this one that talked about why Shaker Lane, the current building, is no longer meeting our needs as a town and as a school. And now today we're going to talk about why the new building is what we need for our students and for our staff and for our town in general. So one thing I wanted to talk about at the beginning is the MSBA process. And we throw that term around a lot when we're talking because we've been talking about this whole thing a lot for a while now. But just very briefly, let's talk about who MSBA are and what their role is in the building of Shaker Lane. Do you want to chat a little bit, Marylee?
Sure.
Thanks.
So the MSBA is the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and they use the state sales tax to fund school projects throughout the entire state. And there are a lot of schools in Massachusetts that are excellent schools, but the properties themselves are very run down or falling apart, and so there's a huge need for schools to have funding for either new construction or additions and renovations. And so the process through the MSBA is every single year, districts write these big, in-depth statements about the issues with their school and what they really need, and they submit it to the MSBA. So that can range anywhere from 20 up to 100 different schools applying to the MSBA at any given year. And so the MSBA looks at these and they identify which schools have the greatest need, and then they've been choosing around 17 schools a year. Mm-hmm. They are looking at doing fewer schools in the future so they can give a little bit more money to other projects. Unfortunately, it will not apply to Shaker Lane, but the point is it's such a competitive process that even by being accepted to the MSBA really says something about the state of the school, that it really is in dire need.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's a great point. And so, as I said, they played a huge role in our design of the building itself. Can you talk to us about what the requirements are for us to get an MSBA grant to be part of the program in terms of design?
Sure. So they have this really big spreadsheet, and you input the number of students, and it populates with how many classrooms you're supposed to have, how big the cafeteria is supposed to be, how big the gymnasium is, how many offices you need. And so it's very formulaic. But then you can take those guidelines and tweak it a bit to really fit the needs of your school and your district. Depending on the category, the MSBA is more or less likely to approve those tweaks to their guidelines. For example, the special ed programs, the MSBA recognizes that districts have very different needs from each other, and the way that they help the students are very different. And so those spaces are almost guaranteed to be accepted. They are likely to accept a lot of spaces for the core education. So this is your classrooms, this is offices for the people who support those, that's STEM classrooms for grades 3 and above. Those are likely to be accepted as well. Tweaks to other parts of the program, they're not so likely to accept. And then the other part of it is a preschool. And the MSBA has not been involved in funding preschools for a long time until fairly recently, and only then if a district included it in their big application to the MSBA at the beginning. So if a school wanted a preschool, they had to include it there. If a school wanted to consider redistricting or shuffling grades around or adding on to a different school or doing some different combination, that is when it needs to be mentioned in order for the MSBA to consider those as options moving forward. Fortunately, the Shaker Lane School has a well-established preschool that was included in that big statement of interest application, and so we got nearly all of the preschool space approved as well.
So let's talk about tweaks real quick. So one of the tweaks, I think, is the changing from a traditional hallway of, sort of dead space and doors on either side as you walk down the hallway to sort of a cluster of classrooms around a central location. Michelle, can you talk about why you chose that design, why we think that's what's best for our students?
Sure.
And then maybe Marylee, you can talk a little bit about the technical aspects of that change.
So this came about through some of the tours that we took on a couple of summers ago, not this summer, last summer. We visited a number of new schools, about 5 or 6 new schools, and we were blown away by one school that had kind of like a rotunda approach where the classrooms were built around this shared space. And we have a lot of teachers that collaborate together and work together in that little hallway, and there isn't room. So we essentially, with the design team, took the long elongated hallway, squashed it, widened it, and created classrooms around it to have that shared experience. Several times we have presentations in the building and there aren't enough spaces. We have the cafeteria or the gym, and usually one of them is in session, whether the students are having lunch or gym is in session. This now allows each neighborhood to have group presentations at any time of the day, collaborate in and out of the area. And also with these little rounded, we're calling them den learning spaces. With these den learning spaces, we're building in special education rooms, so the travel time is lessened. They're pocketed in each room, in each I say tiger's den, but each learning den.
And so that maximizes the amount of time that those students are getting with their specialist.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And we also, in the dens, we incorporated the Imagitorium. So the Imagitorium right now is just a separate space that children go to, and we want that threaded throughout the day in all of the curriculums. So we have broken up the Imagitorium so that it can take place in every den.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, the Imagitorium is really popular.
Yep.
So the kids will get more Imagitorium time,
Yep.
I would imagine, this way.
And just that makerspace time. If they're working on a project, they don't have to travel and go to the Imagitorium, and only one classroom can be down there because that's all that can fit in that small space. The way the dens are configured, you could have the entire grade level be out there working, or just 2 classrooms, and not have to wait for that one designated space in our current building.
Marylee, can you talk a little bit about how the MSBA viewed that change and how you discussed it with them?
Sure. So for many years now, schools have been incorporating, sometimes they call it a project area. This one's the first one I've seen called a den, but it's essentially a collaborative area that is shared between classrooms. And this is just where education has been headed for a long, long time. Schools are no longer being built with that traditional cells and bells layout that we talked about. And for the past couple of schools that I've worked on, there's been more and more of a focus on corridors and what a colossal waste of space they are. If you have a corridor that's used only for circulation, then if you run out of space in other areas, then you have to use this circulation space for other types of activities. And so what if we could increase that space and provide specific areas for these other activities to take place so that the circulation square footage is greatly reduced and the academic square footage is increased, but you still have the same amount of square footage, so you're not spending any extra money to do this. So as we developed the design for Shaker Lane, and we really spread that corridor apart and made it's just a very large central area, we started looking at travel distances for the students. We compared it to what if we did do that traditional layout, how far are these kids traveling? And it was substantially less travel times for the kids to go from the farthest room to get out to the core areas of the school, the shared areas such as like the cafeteria, the media center. So really cut down on travel times. The special ed rooms are great in there, so the kid really just barely even leaves their classroom to receive these supports. They're not separated from their peers. It helps with the people who are supporting them, that they don't have to spend their time, like now I have to escort a kid across the school and bring them back and worry about all that. It's really a great savings for the students, but then it also has structural efficiencies. So now the building is sort of bracing itself, so maybe we use a little bit less steel. And now we have the ductwork for the HVACs. That also doesn't have to go as far.
Sure.
So there are some savings, some economies that have come about through this design.
Two of the points I just was thinking when Marylee was talking is just a clarification. So I think back in the 70s, there was an open concept school where kids just learned in a large classroom. There were 4 different classrooms. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that that is not what we're talking about. Every classroom, every teacher has a classroom, but then they can spill out and learn together. So there is that individualized learning in a room with, the 20 or so students, but then they can spill out and work together. And the other beautiful thing that we designed in this new building is every adjoining classroom has a small group room right there. So if students need a quick service, if they need speech, if they need some reading or math intervention, they are not traveling outside of their neighborhood. They're receiving, again, it reduces travel time, maximizes instruction time, and they're in their classroom. So they could essentially still be with their peers, hearing what's happening, and just getting that small group instruction in a room that joins between 2 classes. So we really thought about efficiency and what is best for students and being in their area when they're learning.
And I would say, from the student's perspective, the kids who are getting these services, you've mentioned this, it cuts down on their isolation time and makes them feel a lot more part of the rest of the classroom and a little less, separated and something different from the rest of their peers.
Absolutely.
Makes a big difference, I think.
I think I would just add that one thing that we've really been looking at is how each of these spaces can be used for more than one purpose. So these small group rooms are not necessarily for the students who are in the special ed program. It could also be a student who was absent on the day of a math quiz and they need to make it up, or somebody who's maybe struggling a little bit with some vocabulary or spelling and they just need a little extra lesson for it. So these are really a resource for every single child in the school.
That's great. So we've talked a little bit about size, but I'm gonna ask head on. So 97,000 square feet?
Yes, 97,323.
That's huge.
Or 232, something like that.
That's huge. So can we talk about, why that's the right size for this, for our needs? For example, are we building for growth already? How much room do we have for growth versus, our actual needs now? Can we sort of?
Yeah, I'll start and then
Yeah.
you can take over. So when we work with the MSBA, they do have a formula they use to populate for growth. And when we input our numbers, the attrition rate of, it's an interesting formula that they use, like females that are currently living in Littleton and other factors that go into it. They allotted us 1 extra classroom for every grade level. So at this time, our current numbers around K are around 17, first grade is at 22, 23, and second grade is around 20, 21. So looking at that growth, adding an additional classroom, that can welcome in 20 additional students at every grade level.
grade, yeah.
And then, when we did design the project, there is room for additions.
And that's also an MSBA requirement, right? They want us,
Yes.
they don't want us coming back for more money in 5 years. They go, we need another wing.
Yeah,
So
no, this is
clearly, the formula works, because I know that people have brought out publicly and said, well, what if we have a population surge or something like that, or a school choice surge or anything like that? I mean, if the formula didn't work for the more than a decade at least, there would be the communities, crying from the highest hilltop saying, look, we're already busted out, and we just built a school 8 years ago. So that's a great point. Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you, Michelle.
The other thing I wanted to just reiterate is that we talked about MSBA, we've talked about how we're part of the program. MSBA doesn't make a whole lot of suggestions, right?
Yeah.
It's here's the formula and here's what you need to build. Do something else, that's on you, that's up to you, but you will build according to this formula at a minimum.
Yes, they say there's a minimum square footage for these spaces, and they have made us acknowledge it every single time we submit a report to them. It comes back with a comment, please note this is the minimum square footage. And we say, yes, acknowledged, again, acknowledged. So they want to make sure that any school that they invest in meets those state standards. And, you know, as you said, provides for growth. And I forget the other thing I was going to say. You had some other part of your question.
It happens to me all the
I
time.
was going to add in, you know, the summer of 2025 was consumed with us creating our educational program. And I mean, it is a 60-plus page document that is filled with, you know, blood, sweat, and tears from many staff members, many district central office members. And when we submit that, you talk about corrections and feedback. You know, there were minimal corrections and feedback, and we were even, I think I was blown away and so proud of us as Littleton, you know, employees that they are using our educational program. They told us as a model.
Wow.
And to receive that, I think I just kind of glazed over it, but then it keeps coming back and keeps being brought up, and I'm like, okay, so all of that work was really, you know, really paid off.
For the state.
So proud of us.
Our-
From the state.
You know, our little town. That's amazing. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say, is that they make you justify every single extra square footage beyond the guidelines that you're asking for, and they'll have follow-up questions and ask you to describe things in a little bit more detail. And based on that back and forth between the district and the MSBA, that's how they determine what extra square footage they will consider reimbursable, that they will partially provide funding for, and what they will not. And because the educational plan was so good, it was very easy for those spaces to be justified, and very few square feet the MSBA did not consider reimbursable.
That's fantastic. So you actually preempted my next question, which was about the education plan, because we talked about that a lot in the last episode about how the old building, we're not able to get to where we want to be with, we're not able to achieve the educational program that we have set forth. And the new school is literally designed to do just that. And the MSBA is checking the work as they do. Does anybody know exactly how many square feet are extra in MSBA's rules lines, or approximately?
I do. It's a tricky question. I have
Okay.
the spreadsheet here.
Yeah.
So the guideline spreadsheet that they give you by default has 0 for preschool, and it has a very, very low number for the special education section.
Okay.
And that's because if you, most schools that the MSBA does don't include a preschool. It's a lot of middle schools and high schools and upper elementary. So most don't include preschool. And because even a district that does have a preschool, it might not be in the statement of interest. So that's just 0 by default. And then the special ed section, they recognize that districts all have very specific ways of helping those students. And so they allow the district to tell them what is needed. And so I had done a while ago some math about if we took the MSBA guidelines and then we added the square footage of the preschool and we added the square footage of the special ed, it ends up being just around 5,000 square feet beyond the MSBA guidelines, maybe almost 6,000 square feet. And of that, about half of it was considered reimbursable.
Wow.
Yeah, so out of 97,000 square feet, that's such a small amount.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And just a couple of things to add on to that. Well,
Yeah.
I was thinking, you know, on a couple of nights ago, we had a joint meeting with FinCom, the Select Board, and the School Board, and we talked about, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. We talked about this being a very special place, pre-K to 2. And I know Dr. Clenchey talked about that is where these schools have been built, pre-K to 2. When you think about children that are 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, that is where you want to intervene. That is where you need more space. That is where you need more services. So when we designed this, we really thought about intervening with our students that need OT, PT, speech, extra reading, extra math, extra supports to develop those skills. And so when we created this building, it was in that design. And sometimes I get asked the question, well, what's going to happen when they go to Russell Street? And the idea is that we are supporting them as 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds in this learning environment so that when they move up there, they will not need the same type of supports and learning environments.
Sure.
And will have made the growth that early intervention does when they're under 2.9 and they come to us. So I know that's not like, you know, they're not going to have the same new school, but it really was designed to intervene and provide these services that we currently can't do. I know I've talked a lot about this on the school tours, that over the past 6 years, we developed what's called a PACE program, Personalized Academic Comprehensive Education Program. And in those classrooms, we have students who have primarily a diagnosis of ASD that would have gone out of district. And when I first started here, they were out of district. And we created these programs because we have the population to support it. So we're keeping these students in district with their neighborhood peers, with their neighborhood friends, and they're getting the education. But that comes with supports that are needed for these students. So we're working within our limits, but to keep them in district, to keep them with us, to save the town money to send them out of district, we need to provide those supports for them at this age, and then hopefully, and some of them have aged out of that and moved back into regular education or a lesser level of special education support.
Yeah.
We touched about, so special education, we've talked about that a little bit, and not exactly the same as ADA accessibility. Can you talk a little bit about why this design is such an improvement and is what we need today in terms of accessibility for students who have different needs physically?
Yes, absolutely. This is something that I have seen come up on school after school. And actually, it brings up a really fond memory where I was in a middle school that I had worked on, and we were doing what's called punch list, basically looking for all the little things that are left to fix. And I'm working on this, and this boy and his aide are there early before the school year starts, and he is very visually impaired. I think he's legally blind. And he comes over and he strikes up a conversation, and he's talking to me like, what are you doing? And then I was asking him about if the signs were working out for him and if he could read Braille. And come to find out, this little boy has a comedy show on YouTube, and I went and watched his YouTube channel. Like, these kids are amazing, and it's so important that everybody should be supported. And so it's very important to me and to Studio G to make sure that any school that we do is accessible for as many people as possible. And so we're always looking for ways to improve, ways to go beyond what just the code requires. We're looking at doing things like a tactile sign that shows the layout of a bathroom, because otherwise you're going into a bathroom, and if you can't see, now you're touching things to try to get oriented. And you don't want that, right? It's better to have a map of it in your mind before you go into the space. So we're always looking for ways to improve. We're looking for suggestions. And it should really be not just for the students, but for everybody in the community. It should be accessible.
We visited a school, and it was actually, I believe, also pre-K to 2 over the summer. And I remember saying to the principal, why do your signs look different that are labeling all of the locations in the building? He said they're all printed with a dyslexia font so that anyone that is dyslexic can read it. And that is something that stuck with me, so that we can have, children or families have that accessibility. So it really just was eye-opening on these tours of what we can bring in to make everything more accessible for families and students.
Yeah, speechless.
Yeah. Rightly so, we've been focusing on our students. Let's talk about traffic. Let's talk about why this design is the right thing for anybody who wants to drive down Goldsmith in the mornings or afternoons.
Yep, traffic in the afternoon has been a challenge, and the Littleton Police Department has been great working with us, and has been over several times. We do have I think it's the tax supported program for our elderly community. We have someone that comes over and meets those hours. But then, I often reach out to, Detective Wodzinski, and I said, Meg, can you please come over? The afternoons are really troublesome. So we have a lot of parents who choose to bring their children to school. And what happens is the way the building is configured, when I first started there, parents were dropping children off in the parking lot, and they were going across the parking lot in front of the buses. And I just sat there my first year and said, this is a recipe for a disaster.
It's making my palms sweat
we need to reconfigure
this.
this. So I reached out to, it's called Safe Routes to School. It's a Massachusetts Department of Ed program. And they came in and they did like a survey, and they, looked at all the options. And so now, I think it's been about 6 or 7 years now, our car riders come down from Goldsmith, they come on to West Roxbury, and they come down and they circle out. But because we have 8 times 7, 56, we probably have 56 car riders, and they end up backing up. And so what happens is, you have the cars waiting on Goldsmith, you have travel coming in the opposite direction, you have families leaving, you have people who don't want to wait in that line and come around, and it can be very safe because we also have walkers who are trying to cross the crosswalk. So with the design of the new school, having it out back in the further field, this traffic is taken away. You won't even see this traffic, it's down there. We have also 2 separate entrances. There would be a bus entrance and a car entrance. Right now, they merge, and we have to make sure that the buses are stopped, the kids are stopped. And remember, they're 5, 6, and 7.
Sure.
It's hard for them. So we have several staff members out there really trying to keep everyone safe. And I think that is our number one, our number one charge at Shaker Lane is to be safe.
Yeah, I think you said it all. I have nothing to add.
I just invite people anytime they want to come, anytime between 3:10 and 3:30, just to see the traffic. It's just we want to keep everyone safe, kids and families.
Yeah, and this new design is really taking a lot of what the elements that you talked about that are the most dangerous. The cars going around, and it's a 2-lane road. So
Yeah.
if one is backed up, that's it.
Right.
And giving our walkers, I think, a safer route as well. So thank you for explaining that part. I think that's of interest to just about everybody in town. Jim, did you have anything that you wanted to ask about?
Oh,
I know.
I'm good.
They've really
No,
covered
you've covered so
everything,
much.
right?
They really have.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about in terms of why this school is what we need as a town right now?
I think just reiterating, I think I just hear Dr. Clenchey's words echoing in my ears, like, when we know better, we can do better, and we can do better for our students. We can do better for our families. They deserve this. The hard work that we've put in when the MSBA came back with some numbers and some of the boards weren't happy, we really sat down and did a tiered system. All right, tier 1, yep, let's take that out. Tier 2, we really don't want to. Tier 3, an absolute must. And we had weekly meetings for several weeks to really say, all right, how can we make this work for the taxpayers? How can we make this work for the town? How can we make this work for everybody? So really being thoughtful and not just saying, all right, here's the price tag and just we're going to have to live with it. So I just think we're really trying to make it work for everybody involved in Littleton.
Thanks.
I would add one more thing
Sure.
about the spending this amount of money on the youngest learners. A lot of times people say it's not a high school, why are we spending this much money? And a big part of that is the way that education has changed and the way the job market has changed. We're no longer looking for what technology do you know. Technology is changing so fast that it's not about what technology skills you know, it's about what soft skills you know. So how good are you at creative thinking and problem solving and working with others and collaborating? And so by introducing this to the students at the absolute youngest age of providing these collaborative spaces, encouraging small group work, encouraging them to present to their peers and get used to public speaking. These are all the skills that are essential in the job market and are never going to go away, no matter how technology changes. And in order for students to succeed at that, the earlier the better. And so this is, it's really why it makes sense to invest in children as young as possible.
And so regarding investments and money and the taxpayers, I would just say that our next episode on Shaker Lane is going to be going through all those numbers. If you absolutely cannot wait, I would encourage you to check out the joint meeting that we held on September 2nd. It's on LCTV, and that was a joint meeting between the Shaker Lane Building Committee, the PMBC, the school committee, the select board, the finance committee, as well as resident experts. And we went through the final numbers with that, with the good news that our grant had been increased from initial projections, and what taxpayers can expect, and how we're going to make this work for everyone.
If I could, just Marylee, you hit the nail on the head in so many ways. But in terms of investing in the children, I mean, education. We have a number of core services in every community. In this community, it takes its pride in education and everything, which is extremely impressive. But as another core issue, and people have turned around and said, well, I don't have kids in the school system anymore, but it's the makeup of the fabric of the community, why Littleton is the way it is. We can also look at it in a different way. Another core service that we provide in the community is for the seniors. There were people that supported that potentially may never use the senior center, are much too young to use the senior center, but they made the investment in something that they may never use. because that is a core thing, just like public safety, DPW, education, and seniors. That's really there. So I think it's the responsibility of the community to be able to recognize that, and in as much as, no, you don't have children in the school system, but at some point earlier on, when your kids were in the school system, the generations before had to make that investment so your children could have that type of environment then. And let's just hope that carries forward.
Yeah, but what I love to say about Littleton is that we look out for each other, and this is a great example of how we can continue to look out for each other in a way that we can be proud of.
Exactly, 100%.
Thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate it. And as I said, we'll be doing another episode on the numbers, but in the meantime, you can check out that meeting from Tuesday night. And yeah.
If anyone is interested, we do have one more tour before the town vote.
Oh,
I
yes,
believe it's
please.
October 21st. It's
Okay.
Tuesday, 6:30 at Shaker Lane,
Okay.
an opportunity for Q&A, and we are in the midst of creating another forum.
Wonderful,
hopefully.
wonderful. So the forum information will be on the website, town
Yes.
website, and the school website as well?
Yep, on our school website, we have
Okay.
a banner at the top with the Shaker Lane Building Committee information.
Perfect. And anybody is welcome to come on October 21st and see for themselves where we are with our current building.
Yes.
So, all right. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having me.
having us.
That's all for today. Thank you.